into the Backroads Bill podcast. I'm Ben, and Bill last week went on vacation. And by vacation, of course, that is a 8 to 9 day trek around northern/western Ontario. It saw him go down to the Terrace Bay area on Lake Superior, up to the Red Lake area, and on the way back. And we chatted about all the different places he went to, all the upcoming stories that he's going to be writing. And the conversation did turn a little bit. So we highlighted the Slate Islands, which is just off Lake Superior, and it is right by Terrace Bay. And Bill gives a bit of a history lesson on what the Slate Islands are, how his visit went. And it was kind of cool. It's kind of got this East Coast vibe to it, which was really, really neat. So if you ever wondered, how does Bill spend his vacations? Well, you're about to find out.
Hi, I'm Natasha Laframboise, sales representative with the Laframboise team at Realty Executives Local Group Inc. Brokerage. We are a local real estate team here in North Bay. Our team of sales representatives, Matt Laframboise, Phil Seguin, and Adam Legros, are ready to help you through the buying and selling experience. We have been providing service to the North Bay and area community for over 17 years. Our goal is to provide knowledge, support, and guidance in order to prepare your home for sale, bring it to market using multiple selling strategies, and get it sold. As a home buyer, we have 2 buyer's agents ready to help you find your home sweet home. If you'd like to know more, check us out on our website, laframboiseteam.ca. We are always happy to help.
All right, Bill. So last week we had a bit of we talked High Falls, the river drivers. We at the end though we talked about your adventures. And last week you were out on the back roads all week on a vacation with the little finger quotes, because it wasn't really a vacation, except it was for Backroads Bill.
It is, and then of course my maintenance light came on in my car. I put so many thousands of kilometers onto the Honda Pilot that I thought, wow, it was one of those whirlwind Backroads Bill things where off I went and going into north central and northwestern Ontario, but and we're going to talk about a lot of these things over the coming weeks with different guests. But I started off by going. I have to think about it. Well, in no particular order, I went to Silver Islet and Sleeping Giant because I needed to take a picture there of the underwater adit. But before
what's an adit?
An adit is a mining tunnel.
Oh, okay.
Okay, but this one on Silver Islet, they tried to keep the water out, but weren't really successful. The richest silver mine in the world at one time, and so you can still see the tunnel, the vertical shafts going down, and so it has to have still water for the shot. I went out to, which we're going to talk about today, the Slate Islands. I'll get back to that. Went up to Red Lake, and we'll have some guests there about this really interesting museum on an island. And then from the island, you go to about 22 spots to see that Klondike gold rush that we had in Ontario in the mid-1920s into the mid-1930s in the Red Lake area. Also went to Atikokan to see this environmental catastrophe in the making, where the Steep Rock iron ore mines are filling in so quickly that they're going to flood a road, and they're going to have to mitigate this. Millions and millions of dollars going into it. Not many people know about it, so we'll probably talk about that. I camped at the most northern provincial park you can camp in, called Packwash, which is near Red Lake. The other park is Tidewater near Moose Factory, but you have to get into your canoe or boat and be aware of the tides to get there. So, and I know I'm forgetting something, but we're going to talk about the Slate Islands today, because it's one of the, when people ask me about my top 10 destinations in Northern Ontario, the Slate Islands always come to the fore, and I think I've been out there now 4 times.
I think that phrase where you say top 10 places, I'm pretty sure there's like 20 or 30 places that are in that top 10.
Well, I can narrow it down. I'm sure there's many.
What's your top? Okay, so rapid fire top 10.
Oh, well, okay.
And I'll be counting, because there can only be, only be 10.
Well, I always start because we've done stories on waterfalls. So the New Post waterfalls, which we talked about at Abitibi Canyon. There's the Agawa Falls that you don't see from the excursion train into the Agawa Canyon. Till Falls on Lake Superior, which you have to access through Old Woman Bay. High Falls, which we most recently talked about. Yep. So that's enough waterfalls, I think, for now. But then I'll go to the Slate Islands, which are off of Terrace Bay. And of course, story-wise, the two stories that come to mind, because we're getting close to 10, is the Bethnal Springs Health Spa that existed in the 1920s off a railway. And you go into, you find it, it's just all the infrastructure they made to get these rich tourists from the States to come up and take this radon therapy. And then the Cold War airport, the jet fighter crash with the bomber, which we've talked about also on a Backroads Bill podcast. But I think there that we're getting, and of course, Lake Superior in general, all along the Lake Superior coastline, which I've been going to, and Pakasaw National Park as well. There's about 10.
I feel like Lake Superior, out of all the Great Lakes, has the most amount of history to it. Because when maybe it's just an Ontario thing, but every time you hear, you think of Edmund Fitzgerald and these things, every time I hear a Great Lake, it tends to be Superior.
Well, the way I describe Ontario sometimes is this. You have the tablelands of southwestern Ontario and the Niagara Escarpment, which goes right up into the Manitoulin. That's what makes Manitoulin so different. Then you've got the Canadian Shield that covers most of northern Ontario, but then you've got that James Bay and Hudson Bay lowlands. So you've got these transitions there. But Lake Superior, the coastline along Lake Superior is so rugged. And so that's what makes it so special. And that's why when people cross over, especially from the United States, Sault Ste. Marie, they turn left or go north because they want to see that Lake Superior coastline. So it has a lot of natural and cultural history, but the scenery is truly stunning, whether you're in Lake Superior Provincial Park or Pakasaw National Park.
All right, so we did that. Those were the 10 destinations, not Matachewan. We so put into reference here, I'm going on vacation next week, so it was kind of like a flip-flop here. So we just got off a conversation with Kenny McCollum, who is from Matachewan. I'm a little disappointed it's not on the top 10.
No, well, it probably isn't on the top 10 because they don't know it that well just yet. But so many things to see there, and there's so many communities like that. Where Wawa is another community like that, and on they go. When you go in and do this investigation, and you meet the people that tell you about the Backroads, because again, Backroads Bill doesn't know that much. It's about the people he meets and the people that either take him out or direct him to, and then do a little research or get the oral history, and that's where you find really, really spectacular places. And again, the West Red Lake Museum, I was up there in 2017 speaking at a Canadian Institute of Mining, but I totally missed this particular aspect of Red Lake, and so recently went back. But also during this trek, and this is a good lead-in, I want to talk about the Slate Islands.
Yeah, you really want to talk about the Slate Islands. And so whenever you do these stories, you always reach out to people. And honestly, that's the best way to try to get information, because and I think I mentioned this on our last episode, people love to talk about themselves in some way or talk about what they're from or what they're passionate about. So Slate Islands, where is it?
Yeah. So for context, and on recent social media, I posted some sea arches and things, and I put the Slate Islands, and the queries come back. I didn't know where the Slate Islands are. So the Slate Islands are about 13 kilometers off of Terrace Bay, and Terrace Bay being west of Marathon and east of Thunder Bay. And so these islands, when you see them, they kind of, like the Manitou Islands from a distance on Lake Nipissing, they kind of rise up in the distance. But again, they're about 13 kilometers off. And I have kayaked out there, and I think I've been out there at least 4 times. Way, many years ago, the reason I got interested in was about the caribou population. And the caribou population is the most southern herd of caribou in North America, and they're on these islands. So it's almost a insular ecosystem. And at that time, there were hundreds of caribou, and you'd go out there, they'd come into your campsite, they'd cross between the islands, and the islands are a broken volcano, and so they frequent that. The old man's beard lichen they need to survive on, and windfill has to occur. And then in the 1990s, some wolves made it out there on an ice bridge to the Slate Islands and decimated the population. Now, the wolves, whether they were managed by locals or they left, and so they transported most recently, I think in 2022, about 10 to 12 animals back out to the Slates. The population, probably from somewhere between 600 and 800, had plummeted down to about 100 or less. And so the provincial government, Ministry of Natural Resources, saw fit that they should replenish this population, and they have done. So when I was out there most recently, yes, I did see a caribou swimming in the water and getting out of the water on one of the islands. So that was good to see. But the other trips you'd see them all the time. It was just like, you would almost get tired of looking at them. But the Slate Islands, too, have this, because of its volcanic nature, have this wonderful array of different colored rocks and volcanic rocks and things like that. And there was a commercial fishery out there at one time. The Edmonds Fitzgerald should have come into the Slate Islands and avoided that November storm, and that could have been one of its options. And so for freighters, not often, I should say, they can do that because Lake Superior is very, very deep. So the Slate Islands, it has that. You talk to people in Terrace Bay, not many people go out there all the time because of the nature of Lake Superior. It can be very treacherous. And so you have to have a big boat, and there's waves and fetch and wind and those kinds of things. There's a beautiful lighthouse out there on the south side.
Well, Terrace Bay, like their actual logo is
it's a
lighthouse.
It's a replica of that particular lighthouse, and so there's so much natural and cultural history there to want to get out there. At one time, there were service providers that would ferry you out. I don't think any of them are in existence. I went out with a buddy, Jason Nesbitt from Schreiber, not Scriber, but Schreiber, nearby Schreiber, and spent the day out there. And just for me, it was like coming back in history. My brother-in-law, who is passed, Kevin Pinkerton, he was the Dorian fish hatchery manager, and the broodstock for lake trout come from the Slate Islands. At the same time, one of my first writing jobs was for an old magazine called Angler and Hunter. I did a fishing story, not much of a fisher, but you fish along where the blue meets the green along the edge, and that's where the lake trout are. So there are a bunch of remaining cabins there now from the commercial fishery. Not many. One is called Come and Rest, and it has a folklore attached to it where over many, many years people would come there and recreate and stay there. And the journals that they had, the entries, it's like reading therapy, why people love to stay there. And I must say the Slate Islands are a non-operating provincial park.
I was going to ask if...
Yeah, and so now they're getting shelters, and they're putting up shelters. They're screened-in shelters, kind of elevated off the ground, so people can either use the shelter or put their tent up inside the shelter as they choose. But it's one of those places I've said I would, if you ask me today where I would like to go to, it would probably be the Slate Islands. 9 times out of 10.
Is the whole place a provincial park?
Yeah, the whole thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, okay. How did you get there though? Because I'm looking on the Terrace Bay website. I guess it is their full website. It's just terracebay.ca. And obviously Slate Islands are part of that. Actually, there's quite a few provincial parks. There's Steel River, Naze, I think is how you...
Yeah, Naze is an operating park. And that's a former prisoner of war camp.
Really?
Yeah. Well, that's another story. And Angler was just to the east of that, closer to Marathon. All those, there's a whole number of prisoner of war camps along in northern Ontario. It's part of our history. So for that provincial park, it is a non-operating park. So you have to get out there. So boaters go out there, and sailboaters from Thunder Bay or on the American side come in there. Lots of safe harbors. So you'll see 3 or 4 big masted sailboats there. The south side, the outside, is so much different than the inside too. Spectacular, as I said. Around every corner, you'll see different rock formations. There's a couple or three flower pot kind of formations. There are all kinds of intrusions that catch your eye. Sand beaches and raised beaches where there is a Puckasaw Pit, and Puckasaw Pits are Vision Quest sites going back many hundreds, if not thousands of years when the water levels receded, and you can see these raised beaches, and on some of them you'll see these circular kind of structures that are thought mostly to be Vision Quest sites. A lot of research has gone into that. So again, the Slate Islands they're out there, but you just can't reach out and touch them. You got to get out there somehow. So the question was, how do you get out there? By sailboat, by boat, by kayak.
How did you get out there?
This time I went with Jason Nesbitt from Schreiber, but I have kayaked out there and back, and it's I'd say too, couple of when you get into the fog and you lose your equilibrium, that can be very disconcerting when you're in a kayak. And sometimes I remember the one time my partner was on one side of the swell, not waves, but swells. I was on one side of the swell and my partner's on the other, and you can't see each other. So, you're just rolling along. So you got to be really, really careful because it is that 13 kilometers. In a motorboat, you're out there in due course, but you got to be prepared to stay and camp because you could get marooned there if you're not watching the winds.
It's interesting going through their website because it gives me like Nova Scotia vibes. Right? Like your eyes lit up when I said that. It like just going through it, I'm like, this reminds me because I went to Halifax when I was very young, and I'm like, this literally reminds me of Halifax. Yeah,
along the Lake Superior coastline, you do get some of that. You do get that East Coast kind of feel to it in many places. Rossport is a little place just to the west of Schreiber, and that's got that certainly fishing village kind of feel. Terrace Bay is a company town, as a pulp and paper mill there, but the coastline and of course the Slate Islands just has that feel. And so I'm excited when you can make that kind of comparison with different parts of Canada, although it's inland, and of course Lake Superior being the largest freshwater lake in the world next to Lake Baikal in Russia by depth or perimeter or by surface area, I don't know, but anyway, one of the largest Great Lake.
Yeah, it just this seems like a really, I feel like if I want to visit someplace in Ontario, I don't know, Terrace Bay looks pretty interesting because like just going through their attractions, they've got a bunch of falls, they have a golf course, of course, but they have, like, you're on Superior, they've got 3 different provincial parks right beside it. They have a lighthouse festival. Apparently it goes on August 16th.
Oh, so well, that's this week.
Yeah, that's the day before we're recording this.
Yeah.
So that would be pretty cool. Like, so what's up with the lighthouse? Do you have any info on that? Because it feels like I understand that Superior, you would need it because it's a giant lake, but I wouldn't think lighthouse in Ontario. You know what I mean?
Well, it's funny you say that because the number of lighthouses, I did a story on the Ottawa River. The number of lighthouses, now they're mostly automated on the Ottawa River, is incredible. But on Lake Superior, the original lighthouse on the Slate Islands and through the Caldwell family, I don't want to say what year it was put out there, but a couple generations, because it was needed for navigation purposes. So it wasn't in its earliest days, like most lighthouses, was manned, so to speak. And very, very important. And of course, the life of a lighthouse keeper, we know little bits of that. So it's on that far side. When I say the far side, I mean the south side, on the open side of Lake Superior. When I say the inside, that's the 13 kilometers from Terrace Bay out to the Slate Islands. So, and that's why the replica is there in downtown Terrace Bay. It's of the same. And when you go out there, it's a federal facility. It's got that white and red cottages, so to speak, and well taken care of because it is still an operating lighthouse.
Yeah, and so this is kind of an interesting thing. I guess there's like a challenge of trying to spot caribou on the island. When you were at the Slate Islands, did you see a lot of caribou? Well, this past time I only saw the one, but other times over, more than 30 years, in its boom situation, again, you'd see them all the time swim between the islands on the land. They come right into your campsite. You could go on and put caribou on the Slate Islands, and you'll see all kinds of pictures
of caribou and people's campsites.
And it's got to be protected, right? Like, I'm assuming there's no like hunting or...
No hunting, and again, it is kind of like a closed ecosystem now again because there's no predators. I explained the wolves getting over there and then leaving and those kinds of things.
But wouldn't that cause an issue? Because like usually it's the whole thing is that you need predators to help cull the population of things like deer and caribou and those kind of more passive animals to make sure they're not overpopulating. That's why like a lot of the hunting that they do, especially a lot of the indigenous hunters, like a lot of their thing is about culling and keeping the ecosystem whole, you know?
Yeah, no, you're quite right. In this particular case, the caribou were there. They probably originally came across on an ice bridge. And then for the most part...
I didn't think they swam.
Yeah, well... They can swim long distances, but for the most part, but probably not that far. But for the most part, then the water is open, very treacherous. There's only occasionally, it's once in 100 years kind of when the ice freezes. And so, again, the wolves got out there one time, and there was a small pack of wolves, and the population really got decimated, as I said. So, needed. And now whether or not you'll see that boom population again, it remains to be seen. But anyway, when you land on the beaches, you see the marks, and if you spend enough time there, you'll see it. I mean, we were just out for the day, and sure enough, we saw one. I was glad to see one because the population had gone down, so I was glad to see that. And but going back to see all the old familiar haunts of the raised beaches, the rocks. There's a shatter cone there as well, which shows about the impact of that particular time. The islands all have different characters. There is high relief there, the boreal forest, and so I find too when I'm at the Slate Islands, you are. It's not like by latitude where we're north of 60 degrees north latitude, but when you're out in the Slate Islands, you really feel kind of isolated. Although your cell phone works because of linear open water, but nonetheless, you really feel you're out there. But again, you won't see many people because, again, people are a little afraid of that big open water to get over there. So if you talk to people in Terrace Bay, I haven't been out to the Slate Islands for a number of years. That's what their usual answer is.
And it's interesting because it's an archipelago, right? Which means it's a collection of small islands. Does it matter which island you're on? Like, is there? I guess there's nothing built up on them, right? Like, there's no buildings.
Just the camping shelters and the remains of some commercial fishing huts, which I think is down to the one that come and rest, and the lighthouse and its buildings. Other than that, no. Each island I think has its own distinct kind of character based on the boreal forest and what may or may happen, and of course the caribou make it so. So yeah, it's one of those special places, and just there's a whole aspect of caribou in Ontario and how they're protected, and so the Slate Islands is a bit of an anomaly, and being on islands that makes it unique as well.
So we talked. You went to Slate Islands. So how long were you on the road for this last week?
I was trying to figure that out, but it was a whirlwind, and I think maybe it was like 8 or 9 days, but I kept moving all the time, almost every second day, so to speak, because there's so many places to go and investigate. And for me, it's a kind of a it's like a staycation, but you're moving. I'm out there sometimes new places, and some places I've been there before, but it's that vast and magnificent land that we live in northern Ontario and this is the time of the year to try to get to some places that maybe are a little more difficult in the wintertime.
How has there been a place in Ontario you haven't been yet? Because it feels like at this point you've been everywhere.
Well, again, we did talk about, I think one of our original podcasts was going to the four corners. First of all, starting with the center of Ontario near geographic center. I ask that question all the time to anyone. Where do you think the geographic center of Ontario is? And I've been there with Brian from Timmins. And then,
if I'm ever on Jeopardy and that comes up, that's going to be one of those I know exactly where that is.
And then, of course, going to the four corners of Ontario, then the extreme north being, Fort Albany, and going the almost 200 kilometers up the coast to the apex of Nunavut, Manitoba, Ontario border. So there's all the places in between that I haven't been. but I think I've covered the Northern Ontario part pretty well. Having driven a car to the most northern point you can drive to before the ice roads start on north of Pickle Lake. Again, the Four Corners in the center, and I think about canoe trips in Lake Superior and all the waterfalls and roads in between. Oh, and I must mention this. That's another thing I accomplished. It's is it 502? I think it is 502. It's the highway that connects Atikokan. No, sorry. There is a highway that connects Atikokan to the other Trans-Canada Highway 11 and 17. But I took the other one, which is west of Atikokan, almost in Fort Frances, that goes north and connects you to near Dryden or at Dryden. So in other words, I've driven all the roads, secondary roads, and all the logging roads that connect the two Trans-Canada highways, Highway 11, 17. So if we draw two parallel lines, and they're not parallel, 11 and 17, and all the logging roads and roads that exist, I've driven them all now.
You should get a sponsorship with some sort of like Jeep or off-roading company and be like, if Bill can get across Ontario with this, it'll be fine for you.
Well, again, as we know, this is my avocation, not my vocation. So as a hobby, the question is a valid one. I love Northern Ontario, and I will continue to. I've been many, many, many places around the world, but home is where the heart is, and my heart's in Northern Ontario.
So when you come back, because obviously the whole idea of a vacation is to recharge the batteries and to kind of, when you come back and you've just been on the road for 9 days, most people would want to like just do nothing and just rest. Do you feel like your batteries get recharged after that? Or do you need like a few days of, peace and rest?
Well, first of all, when you think about it, I set off from North Bay, and then first stops went through Lake Superior Provincial Park, and then stopping in Schreiber, going out to Slate Islands, and went off then another day on the islands off of Rossport, seeing the sea arches and some neat volcanic rocks I'd seen before. And then going to Silver Islet, Sleeping Giant, and then driving all the way to Atikokan, doing the steep rock mines, and then going to Fort Frances, then north, Dryden, Vermilion Bay. Oh, two Sasquatch.
We were going to get to that. Yeah.
There are like 5 Sasquatch figurines in Sunset Country, which is the tourism area of northwestern Ontario. And the Vermilion Bay going straight north, almost a couple hundred kilometers to Red Lake.
And you did meet another Sasquatch person that I know we've done like at this point 2 or 3 different episodes on Sasquatches, but there's another man that we need to chat to about that, and the episode that's coming out next week, which is where we talk to Kenny McCollum from Atachwan. He also has some stuff with some of the aliens.
Yeah,
and some of the
there was a UFO guy, the Glenn Bradley. If you go to a cemetery in Swastika, the part of Kirkland Lake, one of the most compelling headstones. It's all about UFOs on his headstone. You must look at that. Just Backroads Bill. Google Backroads Bill, Village Media, UFO headstone. I guess it'll come up. But anyway, so you think about all those thousands of kilometers I drove and did all those things, because I love writing stories about this. So coming back and then writing the story. So I never write the stories really when I'm there. And of course, I'm using 4 cameras now, the drone and 3 other cameras, just because I get fixated on photos, and I'm very particular about the photos. And of course, on our cell phones, you can't do anything with those. You can't blow them up very big. So, there's some limitations there. So when you think about being on the road for 9 days, all those thousands, no one would want to do that. And so it's better to go alone and be by oneself to just know you've got to keep moving to do these things. But it's the joy of seeing all the beauty out there.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be tough to try to get somebody to go with you for that long. Like, I think it's easier to go on a single excursion, but do you find that's what you have to do nowadays, is you have to kind of go on more of a, you have to kind of bunch a bunch of things together. You kind of have to go on the vacation time instead of doing just these one-off. Like, do you find it easier for you than?
Well, I don't know. I mean, with Brian Emblem from Timmins, we often just take one destination because some of these things take some planning and some time and some logistics. in this particular one, I was able to go from A to B to C to D, end up in Red Lake and find my way back. So, and when you think about it, I'm thinking about A to B to C, like, and driving all that distance to get to Red Lake, because the Red Lake had 2 stories, the West Red Lake Mining Museum, which we'll talk about, and then, of course, the Packwash Provincial Park, the most northern park where you can camp in. So, sometimes it's good to bundle these things, and other times it's good to go, on a weekend jaunt.
Well, you had a good vacation, which is always good. When I go on vacation next week, I will not be traveling around Northern Ontario, but it does sound like you had fun.
Always fun on the back roads and the backwaters, man.
Sweet. So we got some stuff coming up in the future. Of course, the Matachewan episode will be out next week, and of course, we're trying to get some people to come in as well. We're trying to get some of those guests from Red Lake on, hopefully for the week after that or in the near future. We're still trying to get Roy McGregor on. That's been something that's been on our radar for quite a while. He's very busy. Of course, if you don't know who Roy McGregor is, he is a very well-known author, especially, and he's a writer, I believe, for CBC Global.
No, now it used to be with the Globe and Mail. Now I think it's with the Ottawa paper, and still going strong. And after 40 books, and next to Margaret Atwood, I think we need to salute Roy McGregor.
Yeah, so we're going to try to get him on. What other guests is kind of in the brain that you're trying to that we're hoping to get on?
Well, when you think about all the Backroads Bill podcasts that we've done, Ben, together, and all the people we've had, like James Raffin and Andrew, who went to the South Pole, and there's going to be a lot of surprises, because I think people want to share, and it's just, you don't have to limit yourself to your imagination and reach out to contact someone that has had adventures in the great outdoors. I mean, I think we should even start reaching out to some movie stars and say, what's your favorite place in the great outdoors, and tell us about it. But again, our focus has been kind of Northern Ontario for the most part. So that's our genre, and that's our shtick, so to speak. So we haven't strayed too far away from that.
It'd be interesting. I'm just putting this out to the universe. I don't know if this probably will never happen. It'd be really cool is to get Josh Brolin, because he did the Grey Owl, and we talked to Hab Wilson about this. Of course, he taught. What was it? He taught Brolin how to canoe.
Not Josh Brolin.
No, I thought it was Josh.
The James Bond guy.
Who am I thinking of?
Pierce Bronson.
Pierce Bronson. That's who. Why was I thinking Josh?
My brain's working really well today.
Bronson.
Let's get him on.
I will. I'll tell you what. If we can get him on, that'll be a good episode.
Sure.
But it's actually one of the things that is interesting is how, I wouldn't say easy, but if you ever need to talk to someone, reaching out to them, like, it's been pretty easy. Well, I wouldn't say easy, but it's been pretty painless getting some of these higher profile guests on, because half the time you just reach out and they love to come in and chat about their experience, and it shows their love and passion for Ontario.
Well, they like to talk to Backroads Bill and Ben for sure, and about whatever. But yeah, we'll continue to do that, and also look for any if listeners have any suggestions, we should you can contact Clark Communications.
Yeah, leave a message on our YouTube videos, anything. You can contact us as well if you have any suggestions, or anybody you think would be interesting. I know we have a couple of people that have given some suggestions, and we're trying to reach out to make that happen. But
one person we'll have on that I'd like to have on is MP Charlie Angus. He's about to retire after the next this next stint, and we'll have him on because he's a great historian as far as Northern Ontario labor is concerned. So we'll put. I'm going to contact Charlie today.
Okay, sweet. Just make sure it's not when I'm on vacation, because that would be awkward. All right, Bill, we will have to wait and see what's going to happen in the next little bit, but we'll have to keep an eye out for your next couple of stories coming up.
Happy trails.
Well, there you go. A vacation with Bill sounds both fun and a little exhausting. Lots of travel. Also, a lot of new information, new memories to create. And of course, it's always exciting to get a sneak peek on some of the upcoming stories and guests that we're going to have on the show in a little bit. I'm very excited, man. If we get Pierce Bronson in, I'm telling you, that would probably be the highlight. I don't think we would ever top that on this show. So it'll be really fun to see if some of the guests that we're going to have on. So keep your eye out for future episodes of the Backroads Bill podcast. If you want more Backroads Bill, you can find us with new episodes every single Wednesday morning. And of course, where do you find us? Well, anywhere you get your favorite podcasts on your favorite podcast players, and the video version, of course, available on the North Bay Echo YouTube channel. And as always, you can find the latest episodes of not just this podcast, but a whole bunch of local North Bay podcasts on NorthBayEcho.ca. And of course, while you're there, check out our newsletter, Echo Essentials, which puts local news, some stories, events, the newest podcast episodes on the Echo network, all in one neat package. Comes to your inbox every single Tuesday and Thursday. And of course, it's free of charge. Well, we will be back next week as Bill takes us to a small town called Metachewan. But despite being small in population, it has some big personality and history.